Buenos días y bienvenidos.
Good morning and welcome to this new session of ICOT 2015. As a member of the COAS educational group, I have the pleasure to introduce you to NURIA MIRO and MONIKA from the Montserrat School in Barcelona. Number 1 in the 2015 ranking of the best schools in Spain. NURIA MIRO is the headmaster of the school, and MONIKA is the Secretary General of the missionary order they both belong to. They hold a degree from the high-tech, high-graduate school on education from San Diego in California. They've been collaborating with the National Center for Educational Thinking from Harvard and from Killing Community in Indianapolis, amongst other professional events. Besides, they are the co-authors of an experience to share, multiple experiences at Montserrat School, and on smart learning. This workshop is entitled Deep Learning through PBL. Today, they will share with us the keys for change management and educational innovation, as they have been doing for many years. They will be telling us about the synergies that can be created. Let us then welcome NURIA MIRO and MONIKA. Good morning, and thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Monika and myself are really pleased and are very grateful for the opportunity to be here and to share once more our experiences at Montserrat School. Being at a forum like this is an honor for both of us. The Montserrat School in Barcelona is almost 90 years old now, and in the last 20 years, led by Mother Montserrat del Pozo, we have been following a long track in terms of innovation and change management. We'll be telling you about the keys about the project after lunch, and we'll take the opportunity now to share with you some of the key elements, especially project-based learning. The purpose of our presentation is to give you some context and background about how we set about with this new process, and give you time to think about it, because this, in theory, is an interactive workshop. Give you the opportunity to apply the learnings that we have managed in your own context. I know you're all willing to go ahead, so let us hope this is useful. Projects are commonplace in every single classroom in our school, and I'm talking about children from the age of 1 all the way up to those that are about to go to university. Our children have made it possible for us to move from a conventional type of school based in memory, basically, to a new model of school based on critical thinking, on creative thinking, moving from conventional pedagogy to the pedagogy of answers, to the pedagogy of flexible guidelines, moving from an individualized type of learning to a cooperative type of approach, where learning is built based on conversations, on lots of feedback and lots of dialogue. We have moved from a type of teaching that addressed every single school child in the same way to a completely new model, to a new scenario where we have the opportunity to design different activities that have an impact on different types of intelligence, offering our school children different tracks that cater for their own talents, for their own skills, and their own aspirations. It is about flexibility. It is about giving them the best choice at any point in time. And quoting David Perkins, I think that project-based learning has helped us become much more wild. That curriculum that we had in the past, which was so tame, so boring, so lacking in terms of context. So now, it is no longer about learning concepts and memorizing concepts. It is now a question of taking these concepts and using them as a magnifying lens that will give our children the opportunity to understand the world around them. The main structure, the main skeleton of our project is based on learning for understanding, designed by Project Zero at Harvard. And this core structure has been surrounded by new ideas, visual thinking, thinking abilities, Romberger's ideas on the evolution of learning, and even Lenklar's ideas. But in any case, the core structure is there, and it has been a pillar to make it possible for us to understand this in a new light, whilst adopting a very rigorous approach. The rigorous approach that we like to apply to all the processes that we have in place. In any case, we want our children to achieve understanding in a world full of nuances so that they can apply concepts in real life in a genuine way. First of all, we'll have the opportunity to listen to one of our teachers, Patri. She'll tell us about the way she's been designing projects.
We're likely to see how they change physically and cognitively through time, and that helps us to identify collective and individual needs. We take these needs as the point of departure for any project we want to ideate for our learners. The first questions we ask ourselves when we want to start a project is, who are our students? What's their baggage? And what are the strengths and their weaknesses? And what are their interests? And most importantly, perhaps than all that, is what do they need to learn? Once we've answered all these questions, then it's key to ask yourself, what can I as an educator do to help them become long life learners at this stage? And it is important to ask ourselves the stage they're at, because only when you know where they are, can you take them a step further in learning. Now, at this point, we usually don't know what the project will look like. We don't know whom we are going to be teaching up with. But all that is exciting, because to work with projects involves an element of surprise for both learners and educators. And that is the ignition we all need to feel engaged and feel motivated and keep on going, doing what we have to do. Because learners differ as they grow, we can't take the same steps for a project for third graders as we do for ninth graders, for example. So in our school, when we take a project up to sixth graders, what we try to do is to see the world through the eyes of young learners. We try to use their fascinating creativity and their imagination as inspiration for the projects we create. When you let them do that, when you let them take the lead in their learning, you might step aside and you can see how they really learn and how they really grow as learners. Up to 10th grade, things are different because you are no longer facing the little kids you once had. All of a sudden, you've got young learners, and these learners have already some knowledge, some learning baggage, and they are experienced at least a little bit in critical thinking. We must accept as educators that we too learn from our learners, and we need their positive criticism to become better educators through time. At this stage, when you go up to 10th grade, what we do is take our interests as the starting point for the projects we want to create. Because you cannot ask a 10th grader to design an environmentally friendly hotel room if you don't know how to do that, if you don't have any clue of the software you should use for that. So you need to be, if not the expert, at least an amateur in what you want the students to do, so that you can help them through the project. In our community, in our learning community, in this school, we have teachers that sing, teachers that write poems, teachers that can take wonderful pictures, teachers that can cook, teachers that can actually do some interior design. So why not using all these wonderful things we can do as educators to come up with some brilliantly made and engaging projects for our students? Now, when you get to baccalaureate, some people think that there's no room left for project-based learning. And then I ask myself, why? I mean, why do students need to go back to the written-based learning? Why do educators need to take the leading role back into the classroom? I mean, we're talking about learners, older learners, but learners nonetheless. So, I mean, they have been learning all this time, more and better, through some educational project. And then we take it back. I think we tend to forget that when you get to baccalaureate, students are old enough and knowledgeable enough and experienced enough to surprise you with unexpected results. Our role as educators is making sure that students know the steps they need to take for any project they are involved in. And we need to monitor their thinking. We need to monitor their movement. We need to monitor their questions, anything they are doing while in the project. And we need to interfere anytime they got stuck or anytime they make a mistake. But perhaps more important than all that is to know that we need to step aside again when they no longer need us. And up till today, that's something that's very difficult to do. Some might think you can't learn just through projects, and it's true. To learn is to do much more than that. But learning, true learning, only occurs when you just get involved in doing something differently. If we manage to generate products that have a real impact on society, then we are preparing our students to make a difference in the real world.
When projects are the backbone of everything we do to make our children learn, when we make projects become the main meal in the menu for learning rather than the dessert, or even the special meal that we offer every now and then what we are mostly concerned is with children having the ability to reach deep learning. What we want to see is that their experiences help them understand the concepts, help them master the procedures, the methods in different disciplines. What we want them to acquire is all those competences, all those abilities that are so useful for the 21st century, whilst developing a critical type of thinking, a critical type of reasoning, in order for them to be able to apply that in real life, in the world around them. And that's what we mean when we talk about deep learning. We are constantly assessing and analyzing what is happening in our classrooms. We have even carried out research into some basic aspects, such as customization of the language and terminology in PBL, and how to make them aware of what they're learning. We have documented most of this work in writing. What we have seen so far, what we have found out, is that there is a series of aspects that we need to consider right from the beginning, as soon as we start designing any new project. What we have found out is that for any projects to work, for any projects to be useful for children to reach the deep learning that we want them to reach, The project has to be open enough. It has to give the student the opportunity to give us their opinion, to give us their view. Most of the time, it's actually them that choose the problems to solve. We want to see projects that have a tangible result, something that is useful for the people involved. It is in those cases where our effort is perfectly justified. Most of the time, we have a presentation that summarizes the contents of each project. It is also important to show what expectations both sides have, the students and the teacher, making sure that milestones are met without deviations in time. If at the end of each project there is a product or a service as a final outcome, it is always a good thing to have different releases, to get feedback, as much feedback as possible from students, from colleagues, so that each project can be fine-tuned and achieves a deep learning for all those involved. When we first got experts involved in this type of learning, we were in a position to make students realize how important it was to have them involved themselves. We wanted our students to be very clear about how powerful this could be for them. Obviously, the role of our teachers is still essential. They are present right from the beginning in the design, in the choreography of every project. They are always informed clearly about the different stages to go through so that they can anticipate potential difficulties, and they're always there. They're always available for any students. We've heard Patricia telling us that right from the beginning, right from stage one, when we designed the projects, we're extremely careful in selecting the contents, always bearing in mind the interests of both sides, students and teachers. This is Steinberg's book on real learning and real work, the 6 A's in any quality projects. That could be a summary of what we have found out. We have seen what elements must be there in order to achieve success if we want to reach deep learning through PBL. We bear those in mind right from the beginning for all of our projects, and then we use them as criteria for further assessment in order to fine-tune every project so that we optimize the outcome, always taking into account the feedback from all sides involved. It's continuous improvement we're talking about in all projects. Authenticity is one of the elements. We've seen that this is one of the most important aspects. It is one of those aspects that makes the difference between a superficial project and one that is really useful for deep learning. We try to tackle real problems from the real world. We do our best to make our students face challenges which are significant for their own lives. So we have secondary school children that may be working on self-portraits, impressionist self-portraits, depicting themselves 10 years from that point. We can have students in primary school teaching concepts to younger schoolmates, and children in the first 2 courses of primary school developing projects to make our school a clean area. We have also seen secondary school children developing a project for a roller coaster project presented to the main board at the San Juan de Dios board. We have also developed field work using different sources, different methodologies. These give us the opportunities for students to learn firsthand about the methodologies in use in different disciplines. We have had students who have developed research on fair trade, for example, conducting interviews and putting together a video that they have used as an awareness campaign.
De origen del tercer mundo a un precio justo y razonable que puedan subsistir las personas.
Atención, les informamos que en los próximos minutos no vamos a hablar de empresarios avarientos. No vamos a mostrarles imágenes que te pongan los pelos de gallina, ni vamos a hacerte llorar. O a lo mejor sí, porque vamos a hablar de ti, el consumidor. Este eres tú. Este eres tú a punto de salir a comprar. Espera un momento. Antes de que te gastes estos 20 euros, tenemos algo que decirte. ¿Te has preguntado alguna vez cómo se fabrican y de dónde vienen los productos que consumes? ¿Y por qué cuestan lo que cuestan?
El rigor académico lo tenemos en cuenta.
Academic rigor is something we take into account right from the beginning when we start planning. When considering curricular objectives, but also when looking for the main elements of all disciplines, when considering the potential methodologies, the potential procedures that could be chosen for our students in the different projects, and also when integrating skills into what we call the 21st century environment. We want to give our students the opportunity to learn explicitly about thinking skills that can help them resolve different categories of problems. We have students that have got involved in problem-solving methodologies, students who have been assessing the reliability of the sources they have used for their research, students who are beginning to be able to predict the potential consequences of each solution to each problem, whilst doing some very rigorous brainstorming. This is something that is repeated over and over again in an iteration process. All projects also give our students the opportunity to apply the thinking. They give our students the opportunity to realize right from the beginning why what they're doing is valuable, why the contents are significant. I'm talking about assessing, creating. In short, we're talking about opportunities for our students to learn, develop skills, and apply those skills in those contexts where the problems they're trying to solve can be found. We've seen projects including TV and radio contents, or even a newspaper. In those situations, students apply all of their skills, written skills, and even syntactic knowledge. Whilst doing that, they will learn other procedures, such as design and oratory, in the case of our TV projects. When we involve professionals, we help boost the quality of our projects. As we said before, we help our students discover by themselves that what they're learning is useful for their lives in the real world. We have experts involved at all stages. We also have parents involved in all the different stages, giving us their feedback. We have organized cultural outings that have become an additional point to enrich the final outcome of all of our projects. And it is not just students benefiting from everything. Our experts are learning from our learners. Here we have a picture of one of the days when we invited parents to come along to the school.
Varios padres nos hemos reunido hoy para darles consejos sobre un plan de comunicación que tienen que hacer los alumnos de cuarto de ESO.
Several parents have gathered here today to hear about International Baccalaureate. We wanted them to know about it. We are giving them our feedback on how to put together, for example, a communication program, together with some food for thought about social media, technology, and methodologies. A very interesting opportunity.
Y la pregunta que siempre surge y preocupa es la
The question always coming up is that of assessment. And the answer we have for that question is that we need to have a continuous assessment process in place, a flexible assessment procedure, including self-assessment, assessment between students themselves, conventional assessment by teachers, and even assessment from external experts. We have found out that there are different approaches on those different categories of assessment. Our students deliver partial assessments at different stages. There are different points in time during each project, giving students the opportunity to assess different things in different ways. They will explain that in a minute in another video. In short, assessment is a reflection process. It's a thought process that should be used to keep moving in the right direction, so that expectations are explained and final outcomes are explained. We'll have the opportunity to listen to what students have to say about the assessment methodologies in place. They will be telling us about a project on modernism in Barcelona. We had version 1. All groups got together and we put together guidelines. We had brainstorming, where we selected a number of items that were then included for assessment of the project. This was an outing that was organized, splitting us into different groups. We followed different itineraries so that we could compare the walking guide of each group with those developed by the others. 24 hours before that, we had the opportunity to get together so that we could see what elements and what criteria had been used for each guide. Final self-assessment. We were told at the beginning that we would be able to develop our basic 8 competencies. There were 8 sections in the project at different levels. For each competence or skill, we had to select a certain level. This was group work and individual work. We received an assignment in order to reach conclusions about how work was conducted by different groups. We analyzed the outcome to match it with the initial expectations. Very well. Now that we have seen all the keys that we believe can be used to achieve success with deep learning and PBL, is the time to get our hands a little dirty. We would like to organize an interactive activity. We don't have that much time, but we would like to see how we can integrate these ideas into designing any new project. So we would encourage you to imagine that you have never created a project like this before. Just pretend that this is square one. Today, it is day 1 for you to start working on PBL. No need to move around the room. Just do your best to try and work with the people that are sitting next to you. We'll see the basic elements, and we'll do our best to start the process, designing a new project. Okay, are we ready? Very well. Well, since this is day one, this is the first project ever, and you heard what the teacher had to say in that video. She was talking about how important it is to be motivated, how important it is that we as teachers get excited about everything we do. Let us try to find some inspiration. Let us try and decide the topic we will cover, okay? So let us try to find our inspiration and choose a topic. This is individual, okay? Just think about it for a few minutes. After a while, we should talk about our interests, our hobbies, something we feel really passionate about. We should also think about historical events, something that has just happened or that is about to happen in your own personal environment, which could have an impact on the project, something that could be of interest for your students. We can also wonder about what the main objectives could be for our students, what really matters for our students, or perhaps think about the curricular objectives that we have for this academic season. We could also think about the different needs that we have in our surroundings and whether our students have any specific problems that are relevant and that they could solve in real life. So now that you've thought about all of these things, as you finish the mental processing of the ideas that came to your mind, how about talking to the people that are sitting next to you so that you can share with them information about your hobbies, about the events that have come to your mind, and that will help you choose a topic of interest.
Sí, no, es que este no quería que... Ahora, el tiempo. Sí, bueno, pero es que es lo que quería que quedase.
Cuando tengan esto, si quieres, ya van a hacer las metas, ¿no?
Sí, pero primero, bueno, el tema, sí, no sé si ahora ya, ahora que lo están comentando.
¿Qué momentos?
Ahora en realidad ya están también por lo tanto. O cuando se haya llenado, cuando apare y diga lo de... Muy bien. vamos a parar un momento, os interrumpo.
Okay, shall we stop for a second? Let me interrupt you.
Sí,
Okay.
os interrumpo un momento.
Let me interrupt you for a second.
Ahora habéis comentado.
You've been talking, in theory, about topics that are of interest to you.
Ahora sería el momento.
So now it would be the time
Compartido, pues, quiénes somos y algunos que tal vez no os
after sharing
conocíais.
who we are.
Ahora os voy a dejar 2 o 3 minutos
I'll now
más
leave you
para que podáis,
for about 2 or 3
por un lado,
minutes so that you can, on the one hand, decide about the topic to cover,
interesa, y el
that
tema
topic
es
you're
muy
interested
amplio.
in.
Puede ser
I'm talking
las
about
elecciones, puede
a
ser
wide
el
topic. It could be
deporte,
elections,
puede
it could
ser,
be sport, it
pues,
could
la
be
cocina.
cooking,
Entiendo si habéis partido, pues, de alguna de estas preguntas que os hemos hecho.
based on the points that we've raised.
Un tema que os interese,
So choose a
en
topic
sentido amplio.
that may be of interest
Y
to you.
también decidir
And then decide
para qué edad,
the age
para qué
group,
curso queréis
okay,
crear
the
este
age
proyecto.
you would
Y
like
para
to
esto,
consider
pues, sería
that
bueno
project for.
en la pareja o el trío en el que estáis,
So in the small
pues,
groups
si
you
hay
have
alguno,
created,
pues, que tiene una clase que tiene que dar o que
if
tiene,
you
pues,
are
alguna asignatura
doing
ya
some
para
brainstorming for
establecerlo
the
para
next
el año que
academic
viene, o
season,
cuando
if you're
vuelva
thinking
a su
about
vida,
new approaches
para que
for
se
your
pueda hacer
subject,
real.
try to
Decidir
make it as
el
real as
curso, la
possible.
edad
Okay, so
a
decide
quien queremos
the
enseñar
topic,
el proyecto.
the age group you want to
Ya,
target.
os dejo los 2
Okay,
minutos.
that's 2 or
El
3
tema
minutes
y
now.
el curso.
The topic and the age group.
Muy bien.
Very well.
Tenemos,
Now
ya tenemos un tema escogido.
we should have a topic selected, a topic that motivates us, and we should have also selected an age group, a course that we want to target with this project. So we now take one more step, which is that guided by academic rigorousness, we should now start thinking about the subject. We should start thinking about our curriculum. In short, thinking about what we would like our students to learn about, to understand. We should now start thinking about the class we are targeting, about the subject or subjects we have in mind. And then, in the small groups we have created, thinking about the goals. What do we want our students to understand? What concepts we want them to understand? What procedures we want them to master? But above all, what we want them to understand. And along those lines, I would like to encourage you to rewrite those curricular objectives. We know about all the different elements in curricular objectives, so let us try to rewrite the curricular objectives in terms of the understanding of our students. if we could perhaps write down 1 or 2 understanding goals. If we choose, for example, the topic of sports or the topic of elections, we should establish the goals in terms of understanding that we could focus on. Some are very easily detectable. If we're working with modern languages, with history, goals in understanding may be easy to determine. But how about more difficult subjects? For example, I would like to focus on this curricular goal through a project on sport. Perhaps sport has nothing to do with the subject, but let us go ahead. In some cases, with some curricular objectives, we can deal with topics that apparently are completely unrelated. So, go ahead, be brave, we'll give you some minutes so that you define the goals you would like to establish, and define them in terms of what you want your students to understand.
Sí. Para estos proyectos,
for these projects, we use a graphical organizing tool. As you reach an agreement, you can use this tool to write your goals down. I have them in Spanish and in English. Is there an English-speaking group in the room? You can also share. It's in Spanish and English. Thank you very much. You can move on. Okay, if the English-speaking groups, could you raise your hand?
Un minuto más.
One more minute.
Si os parece, ¿sí?
Muy bien.
Very well. We shall now assume, yes? We shall now assume that you have reached an agreement on the goals and you have at least one goal in writing. And now, if not with all the groups, we would like to hear maybe one or two examples. If you could share the agreement you've reached with us, from perhaps one or two groups, could you please share what you have written down? Who is willing to break the ice? You've been participating in the workshop, haven't you? Myself. Okay, let us get some inspiration from the attendees. I hope it is useful. I teach in year 1 of secondary school in Spain, natural sciences. We have talked about a project in botanics in the region of Valencia. Species, botanical species that have had an impact on the economy of the region. That was the topic we have selected. So let me just see what we have written. Goals in terms of understanding. Okay, what we would like to cover, well, the taxonomy of species. This is year 1 in secondary school. The usefulness of different natural species, the problem of plagues, because some species have disappeared. And then competitors, rice from China, for example. We're a very famous region for the quality of its rice. I come from the south, but I live in Valencia. And for those outside of Spain, rice is a major product of Valencia. And then the classification of living organisms, the taxonomy of different animals and different plants around our fields. And then the economic, the financial impact of different products. The impact on our economy, because we may sell a lot of oranges and a lot of rice. That is a lot of context, Monika. Very well. She has just told us about the process, moving from the goals into specific requirements for understanding or specific objectives. She's told us about how students will be able to understand. It is not just contents. It is students understanding that different species can be categorized following a number of criteria. As soon as we introduce a what, we are specifying what we want to focus on for them to understand and the depth of that understanding. Because you can apply taxonomy in year 1 of primary school, but you can apply it in a much deeper sense in year 1 of secondary school. That's a good example. Could we have another one? Hello? My name is Ángeles. We work for the IDEO school. we will be launching a project which will be called the History of Rock. You can see why I am selecting this project. And this goes for people in secondary school, for students in years 1 through 4. It would be a historical analysis, including political geography and some political criteria. We want our students to understand that rock and history can get together, can go hand in hand, in the sense that some historical events can be described using rock, thereby including more than one discipline. We're talking about language, literature, music, history. And on the side of the English language, I think my colleague has something to say. When I was told, we shared a number of things. We thought of organizing a contest, a music contest, with an introductory video for each country. So, for example, making a video, putting together a video with an introduction for each of the English-speaking countries of the world. Thank you very much. I hope you realized that as soon as we start thinking about goals in terms of understanding, we become implicitly more specific. We start focusing on some specific ideas. We introduce nuances, and ideas crop up. We start visualizing the process. And that takes us to the second stage, or to the next stage, which is what we call the generating topic, or the essential question that we need to raise. When we talk about essential questions or provocative questions, it is always important to ensure that those questions relate to the main subjects in the different disciplines. We want to create controversy. We want our students to get really involved, to get really excited about what they do. And questions that cannot be searched using Google, questions that are relevant by themselves, and which will not allow for straightforward copy and paste. Questions that give our students the opportunity to establish connections. So an additional 2 minutes with the goals for understanding and the specific nuances that they have introduced. How about doing some brainstorming now and see if you come up with essential questions? The title of the project. This is what we need to think about for the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Algo que enganche a los alumnos.
Something that is appealing, that can act as a hook for them to get excited about.
Sí, bueno, pero ahora hago un minuto y todo. Estoy mirando eso.
Espérate un momentito, pero la gente ya ha ido bien al principio, ¿sabes? Para que
Muy bien.
Very well. So, we're done. Hopefully we're motivated. Yes? Are we done? We have initiated a conversation. That interesting conversation that should take us to the corridor so that we keep brainstorming when we leave this session, thinking about ideas for this project. So now let's move on so that you can see the entire process and you are in a position to reproduce this elsewhere. So now we take a step back to start thinking about those big questions. Sorry, for you to see the entire picture, okay? Because we're only left with 5 minutes now. We would like you to keep working on this so that over lunch you get together again and keep working on this. So, big questions. What big questions are related to this project? What big questions you could raise so that we could try and find some responses that would give us the connecting elements with the different components of this project. Another important thing, we don't have time for this, but we'll give you 1 more minute so that you can think about the final outcome, okay? We've talked about authenticity and final outcome as 2 of the main elements that can make a difference. What final outcome can you think of? What could students do to show, to prove that they have learned? Something that is practical and tangible. I'll give you 1 minute for you to do some basic brainstorming on this.
Muy bien.
Very well. And since I know that you have come up with quite a few ideas on final outcomes, real final outcomes, be they products or anything else, things that can be carried out for real, things that do not end up in the wastebasket in the classroom. Now comes the time when we go back again to those 6 A's of good projects. Now we will start creating opportunities to learn. Those activities that will allow our students to get immersed in everything. Those activities that will keep our students motivated and excited about what they do. The activities that they will need so that they can arrive at a good quality product. Those thinking skills that they need and that can be integrated in the process. The experiments, the classes, what activities we can work on, bearing in mind that our students have different types of intelligence and that we need to offer them different opportunities to learn, different points of entry, different ways to learn, and different ways to elaborate on the final outcome, without disregarding the draft documents, the assessment that takes place at different points in time, and the feedback they need to produce. In the graphical organizer, you should include activities, introduce information about how these activities relate to the goal, whilst thinking also about the type of assessment that will need to be applied to different types of activities. That way, we will ensure that we will assess in an effective manner. We'll find out whether this is authentic, whether there's active exploration in place. And in this way, we will be in a position to design the experience, the learning experience for our students, right from the beginning, from that point of entry all the way through to the final presentation. Since we have done this very quickly, we will give you the opportunity to download the result of our work. It has been uploaded to iTunes, and you can access it so that you can reproduce it elsewhere. We would like to finish our presentation with an example on how this can be applied to our classrooms. In principle, step 1 has everyone involved. In theory, all of you have reached point 2. This is Natural Science, Year 4, Secondary School. We have developed a project where we include elements on health and the human body, the different parts of the human body. Here we choose different foodstuffs, and based on our selection, you need to do some research. Understanding project, course 4, primary school. Within you, there is a part of me. When we first thought of this, we raised a number of questions to see whether there were connections between the different parts of the body, the different systems in the body, the impact of our habits on our health, and based on some big questions, we tried to define what we want to achieve in terms of our students understanding different items. Once we established these goals for understanding, we started designing activities that would allow our children to reach that level of understanding. We started working on preliminary activities so that we could give them a basic introduction to the subject, giving them the opportunity to build a mental map, followed by additional activities that help them think and get into details in greater depth. Our students have been using thinking skills, such as the descending classification mechanism, and they're now using graphical organizers based on Sinclair's methodology, helping them learn from their own thinking processes. We have used technology. We have given a list of foodstuffs to all of the groups. They would use the iPads to find information about each different type of foodstuff and categorize them. They then use laptops to find information, to watch videos on the different items they need to cover. Throughout the project, they've worked individually and as part of the different groups. Roles were assigned to different members of each group. They would then share the information collected. At the start of each class, we would gather all the students, we would give them a basic explanation on sources, and after that, each group would get an assignment on the instructions and the steps to follow. Next to the instructions and to the steps, they would get a list of the materials they would need to use. There is a piece of paper with a graphical organizing tool and another piece of paper with a list of information resources, so that they by themselves have the ability to work on the topic, and we can move around the class, solving doubts or clarifying any points that may remain unclear at any stage. There is a final product, which is organizing a supermarket with all those foodstuffs. For each foodstuff, there will be a QR code that will include information on the impact of each foodstuff on the human body, benefits and drawbacks. We wanted our students to assess themselves. They will have to explain their outcome to students that are currently in year 3 of primary school. Very well. Thank you very much indeed. Let us hope that you can take some useful things back home.